Hello, friends. Welcome to Vinyl Ventures. All right, that's a little bit different. I got into my Jim Nance.
Your low energy intro.
Yeah.
Hello, friends. Let's talk about music today. Welcome, everybody. We are here to discuss not cover tunes,
Remakes.
remakes, and tell us what the difference is.
There's really no difference, but a remake, we're talking about remakes that kind of transcended
The original.
the original.
Yeah. And, a lot of cover tunes do. And there's a reason that groups and artists do cover tunes. They wouldn't re-record a song that they knew was unpopular.
Very true. And when we say transcend, we just mean it. I mean, the original may have even charted higher.
Yeah.
But the remake just became bigger in the music lexicon.
Yeah. And, that just a little twist, just a movement, one degree or the other with those remakes.
Yeah.
And we want you guys to move right over to our YouTube channel, explore the dashboard there. There's a lot of shows, a lot of mediums, a lot of shorts, unboxings. What do we want people to do when they go to the YouTube channel, John?
Subscribe as the number one.
Yes. And
then comment.
Yes.
Then you like the video, give us that thumbs up.
Yeah, and if you really, really like it, share it with a friend or a family member or a stranger. Sharing a link to our YouTube channel with a stranger is the kindest thing that you can do.
Or share on your socials. That does even more because who knows who's going to find us.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also want you to check out the link to our merch department, which there's a few things there right now. We're trying to build up that cadre of Vinyl Ventures merch. Hey, when you're talking to us, when you're commenting, tell us what you'd like to see made with a Vinyl Ventures logo, just like this record, right?
Very true.
Basically, we want you guys to produce the show.
Please.
So tell us about the remakes and what they mean to you.
I love covers, but remakes, I mean, I love covers so much that, bands often in their shows, they're with covers.
Yeah. Well, they end their shows with covers, or they'll play a little mini set of covers. The music that we grew up on, that we love, that we remember from times past, it's really comforting, I think.
Yeah.
And for live bands or even just sitting, a lot of times I will put a cover album on because there's plenty of albums that are just completely covers. A lot of times I will put that on. It's a comforting thing. You're hearing something familiar, but you're hearing it in a different light. And to me, I love that.
Yeah, and one thing I don't know that we talk about that much is that bands grew up with an influence of music and they want to convey that influence.
Yeah, they want to share what influenced them, what that soup that their current music is, and what those ingredients are. And those are bands that they grew up with, music they love, music they enjoyed listening to at different points in their life. So that's kind of why we're doing the Remakes show. John, I would love for you to share your first remake with us.
We're going to start off with a big one.
Yeah. I'll take the original Vinyl Ventures record.
Sinead O'Connor, Nothing Compares to You, off the I Do Not Want I Do Not Want What I Haven't Got. That's a mouthful.
It is. Maybe it was easier for her to say.
Yes.
Being Irish, I don't know.
It probably was.
This is a great example.
Yes. And the album came, or the song and the album came out in 1990, right at the tip of grunge.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a funny one because it was one of several songs that Prince, for one reason or another, chose not for himself. His studio recording wasn't released until 2018 of this.
Yeah.
That he did. But he saved it for The Family, which was a group that recorded in his studio, and they only had one album.
Yeah.
And it didn't really do great. But Sinead's cover was a smash hit.
There is so much gravitas. Like her or not, there is so much gravitas in her music. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And maybe she was kind of politically charged as an artist. She had things she wanted to speak about. All of those things, and a lot of artists do that, but there have been very few artists that have just such force in their being, not just in her performing, but she was just an intense person, and her interpretation of this song. I have the Prince album. I think it was released in 2018 by Prince on the Originals album.
Yeah.
My wife got me that album. So you're hearing Prince's versions of all the songs you've heard other people do, like this one and Manic Monday that he gave to the Bangles. For a guy as successful as Prince was, to have the kind of output to be able to just shuffle them off to other artists and they have hits with them, that's the mark of a pretty great artist.
Yeah, and this song was the number one song in the world. Not the U.S., in the world.
Yeah.
That's a pretty tough nut to crack.
Yeah, it's amazing. And, she just passed, I think she just passed away in 22 or 23.
Yeah, not long ago.
But yeah, this is a shining example of exactly what we were talking about.
It's a remake that needed to be remade.
Yeah. And, you have to think that the producers and the artists, when someone like Prince comes to them and says, here, you have to think that their instincts have something to do with whether or not they're going to, bet the farm on it. Maybe not bet the farm, but, there was a point after this came out where she was like everywhere.
Yeah.
And there's a machine behind that, a PR machine behind that, especially as the record industry was back then. Like you said, on the verge of grunge, basically changing everything. But that's a great one because that is a place in time as well as a really, really great version of a song. I love it.
You're up.
I'm up. I can't remember where I put my records. So we don't talk about Jeff Beck very often. He just passed away a few years ago too. And this is Blow by Blow by Jeff Beck, which is kind of considered one of his great albums. And there are a few Stevie Wonder songs on here that he does that aren't covers because Stevie kind of gave him the songs. But the cover on here that I wanted to talk about is She's a Woman by the Beatles. And the song She's a Woman. And we just listened to Jeff's version of it. He kind of did a slowed down reggae breakdown of this song. And it's let's see, it is 4.5 minutes long. So that's longer than the original. But the thing that people love about Jeff Beck is his style of playing. And he broke this song down, and there's like a reggae beat and like different percussion and things going. And it's obviously instrumental. It's just a really cool take on a Beatles song. I mean, a lot of people who are interpreting Beatles music wouldn't have that thought. Let's make this reggae.
Yeah.
This came out in March 1975, so Bob Marley had started to take off. Reggae and all of the offshoots of that were starting to become things that people in American music were aware of.
Yeah.
Before then, it really wasn't. So I get the instinct to do it. It's just really an interesting turn and an interesting take. And if you haven't listened to this album, it's really, really great. This was actually, speaking of the Beatles, this album is produced by George Martin. So
I wonder if George had anything to do with him covering that song.
he may have.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting. George Martin was a busy man in the 70s, not just with the Beatles. Well, the former Beatles at that time. There are a lot of people he produced songs for. Now, his methods didn't always jive with other artists. I know that I think he was one of the people that Billy Joel wanted to produce The Stranger, but George Martin insisted that they use studio musicians, and Billy wanted his band to play on it. So, there are some old school thoughts that some of these producers have, but, there's a reason George Martin was as successful as he was for as long as he was. But yeah, if you haven't heard this, check it out. The personnel are Jeff Beck on guitars, Max Middleton on keyboards, Phil Chin on bass, Richard Bailey on drums, and Stevie Wonder is uncredited on clavinet on Thelonious. So, yeah. There's a lot of Jeff Beck music out there, and I know you're not an instrumental guy.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of a place I've started to step. Now, he played near here, like 2 years ago, and I missed the show. Johnny Depp was touring with him for some reason. And the Johnny Depp thing and the price of tickets kept me from going. And then Jeff Beck passed away like 6 months later.
Oh.
So, but he is considered one of the geniuses on his instrument.
Yeah, and Blow by Blow is really, this is a well-known album.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you're going to dip your toe into Jeff Beck, this is the one to start with.
Yeah, and, he started with the Yardbirds and, kind of forged his own path after that.
Yeah.
So, Blow by Blow, Jeff Beck, check it out, kids.
All right, are you ready to dance?
I'm going to have to make some room.
All right, here we go.
Oh, yes.
Soft Cell.
Yes.
On the Non-Stop Erotic Cabaret album, there was a little song called Tainted Love.
It's a big one.
Yes, it was a big hit for them. And the funny thing with this song, it was originally by Gloria Jones. Mm-hmm. And Gloria Jones was Mark Bolan's girlfriend.
Yes, that's right.
And it was a minor hit in the UK. But when when Soft Cell did it, mm-hmm. it became a major hit.
And it's such a strange take on the song, but it again, it's a place and time,
Yeah, it was a number one hit in 17 countries.
Wow.
So it really made its mark pretty big.
Yeah. I wonder how you keep an erotic cabaret going.
Well, there's one way.
Yeah. I guess you'd probably have to hydrate a lot too.
Yeah, you'd have to hydrate a lot. It was the best-selling single in the UK in 1981.
Really? Huh. Well, I remember my younger days after having turned 21, you couldn't go to any club late night where people danced and they played music and not hear this. It's like, I know it was a big deal when it was released, but it remained a big deal and still is a big deal as time goes on. It
was such a big deal that it set a Guinness Book World Record for 43 weeks in the Billboard Top 100.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting. Huh. I never would.
I'm sure that's been passed since,
Yeah.
but at the time it was a Guinness Book World Record.
That's crazy. I've always thought that the cover of this is really, really interesting. And then, of course, there's the sex literature.
Peep show. Cinematic sex.
I don't think I've ever heard the term sex literature, but that's cool.
That's good.
That's a good one, man. You know what? I think I do have this. I think I have this as an inherited record. I'm going to have to check when I get home.
Yeah.
Because it's great. I haven't listened to the rest of the record.
It's very dance beat stuff, and that was going on in the early 80s in the UK. 12-inch singles were huge.
Yeah. Yeah. So like extended dance mixes.
Yeah. And the extended dance mix of this, the 12-inch, I've been looking for. I haven't been able to find a reasonable copy.
Huh. Okay. Well, you hear that, folks. If you see it somewhere, let us know. You know, they have a lot of times at record shows, there's going to be a guy or a couple guys or folks who have 12-inch singles.
Yeah, and sometimes they wind up in... because not a lot of people seek out 12-inch singles as much anymore. Mm-hmm. So they wind up in weird bins.
Right. A lot of times, I have just noticed that a lot of times they'll be the last things in the boxes.
Yeah.
Like they'll have alphabetized, they'll have artists, and then they may have them broken up by genre, but then they'll have 12-inch singles like as the last things in the box. Like they'll stick as many in there as they can to fill it up. So,
it's a great way to sample a band and not spend a bunch of money.
Yeah, and have a version that's probably never going to be on an album.
No.
Like a lot of these singles are 8-10 minutes long.
Yeah, they're long,
and they're not going to take up that much space on an album.
No.
So that's a good one, man. Excellent choice.
Soft Cell, Tainted Love.
So my next one, I think I've mentioned the song before, and this is still in the wrap because I have an old copy of Dynasty that is one that I listened to and open. But this is of the 2015 Kiss remasters. And this came out in 1979. And it's always been one of my favorite Kiss albums. Just the cover is so cool. And then you turn it over. I Was Made for Lovin' You is the big song on this, and that's the song that kind of upset many people because it's kind of Kiss's foray into disco. But the reason that I brought this is because there's a Rolling Stones song on here that the Rolling Stones really aren't all that known for, that Ace sings, called 2000 Man, and they also do it on the Unplugged album. Ace, just like we were talking about back in the New York Groove, Ace somehow manages when he does cover tunes to like make them his own. And it's a talent because a lot of times you'll see somebody performing someone else's music and the eyebrow goes up and you're like, I don't know about this. Every time Ace does it, and he's done 2 full albums in the last 6 years of remakes. He calls them Origins, Volume 1 and 2, and I think he's doing a 3rd. Obviously, he's aware of his talent for this because you wouldn't make more than one covers album if you didn't feel like it was worth it. But 2000 Man it absolutely is a banger. The studio version's awesome. The live versions are awesome.
Yeah, and when they would choose to do it on the Unplug,
oh yeah,
it's something that reverberated with the band.
Yeah. And, this is kind of the beginning of the fall of the original Kiss. In 78, they each did solo albums, and then they came back together, did Dynasty. And in reading about the record, each of the guys brought 4 or 5 songs in. And Ace actually has 3 songs on this record, which is, I think, the most that he ever had on a Kiss album. But each of the guys, they were kind of still in that solo album mindset because they each brought songs and kind of threw them in, and then they decided what was going to be on the album. Even Peter, some of the stuff off of his what would become his first solo album. He brought in to be on this album. So, yeah, interesting dynamic. Those guys in Kiss, and I'm just waiting for them. I know that they sold their catalog for like $300 million. I know that they had their last concert like a year and a month and a half ago. I'm just waiting for them to come back. So, clock's ticking, Gene and Paul. What's your next one?
Next up, we're going to keep it erotic, but in a different way.
Yeah.
Midnight Cowboy.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I brought the soundtrack is because Everybody's Talking by Harry Nilsson is on this soundtrack, and it gets played in the movie multiple times.
Yeah, it's one of the first movies. First off, it's a strange movie.
Yes.
Secondly, it's one of the first movies I can remember, and obviously I saw it way after it was released, but one of the first movies I can remember that takes a song that's kind of like the theme song and breaks it down, and you hear that melody of that song in different scenes in the movie.
Yeah, it really is the theme song for the movie, but it gets played tons in the movie. They just keep going back to it.
Yeah, it makes an appearance so often that it's almost part of the narrative.
And it was originally done by Fred Neil.
Mm-hmm.
Harry won a Grammy for his cover, Remake, which was used in the it came out in 1969.
Oh, okay.
In this 1969 film,
Yeah.
which is a weird film. As we talked, it's about male prostitutes in New York.
For that era,
Yes.
definitely.
Yeah. It took some
Strange.
chances.
Yeah. I mean, you've got Dustin Hoffman in this movie, which is very odd for the times, maybe ahead of its time. But, he was just in The Graduate a couple years before this, which was also a pretty ahead of its time movie.
Yeah. And Fred Neil's version is, he's more like a songwriter and, or a singer-songwriter.
Yeah.
And Fred just retired to Florida.
Oh, did he?
He just got out of the music business
Okay.
and retired to Florida. But his song lives on with Midnight Cowboy and Harry Nilsson.
Yeah, it's definitely an infamous movie that you both don't hear much about and hear about a lot. You know what I mean? It's kind of on its own frequency.
Yeah. It was, it's the only X-rated film, currently NC-17, to win Best Picture.
Yeah.
That
crazy.
says something right there.
Yeah. Just very, very strange. But, the soundtrack's a big deal. The song is a big deal. That kind of set. I think that this song kind of set the stage for where soundtracks would eventually. I think the 80s may have been like one of the breakout decades for soundtracks. And I really feel like this set that stage because, like I said, that music gets carried through so much of that movie that, like I said, it's part of the narrative. It's like a character in the movie.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And thank you. And it's just really interesting. It's an interesting approach. And then you have contemporary directors doing things kind of like that in movies now with like James Gunn, Quentin Tarantino. The list goes on of really embedding that music into something more that's not just music. So that's great, man. That's a good call.
Harry Nilsson, Everybody's Talking, Midnight Cowboy. You're up, cowboy.
All right. Yippee-ki-yay, MRFers. This is AC/DC's only EP, which we have talked about, means extended play for some reason. This has 5 songs on it, and it is a banger of an EP. This was released in 1984. It has 5 tracks. that had been previously released only in Australia. And despite the EP's title, the song Jailbreak was actually recorded in 1976 and was originally released that year on the Australian version of Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. The other 4 tracks were originally released on the Australian version of the band's debut album, High Voltage, recorded in 1974 and released early the following year. So the reason that we're talking about this is Big Joe Williams had a song. He was a Delta blues artist, and he had a song called Baby Please Don't Go. And this is a case of AC/DC showing their roots, showing what they, where they got their chops, and their version of that song is just absolutely fantastic. And I've always loved the cover of this too.
Oh, it's a great cover.
We talk about AC/DC a lot, but I think that they deserve to be talked about a lot, because not only are they a great rock and roll band, and I almost called them American, and they're not, because they're from Scotland to Australia to America and, Europe and everything. But it feels like AC/DC belongs to everybody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They feel like they've been around doing it as long as they have, 50 years now. And it kind of feels like the band just belongs to everybody.
Well, yeah, when you've been doing it that long,
Yeah.
and you still get played, and they'll probably still be played at arena shows, like basketball games, football games, for the next 20 years.
Oh, probably longer than that. Probably forever. I remember when I would go to shows in the 80s, and I went to a lot of them. It's almost always AC/DC is being played leading up to the band coming on stage.
And it doesn't matter what the band is. Because they're one of those bands that it's not really offensive to anybody.
Right. Baby Please Don't Go. I love almost every version I hear of it, but theirs with just the guitar, bass, drums, and vocals. It's awesome. But Joseph Lee Williams, Big Joe Williams, he was an American Delta blues guitarist, singer, and songwriter, notable for the distinctive sound of his 9-string guitar. And performing over the decades, he recorded the songs Baby Please Don't Go, Crawlin', King Snake, and Peach Orchard Mama, among many others. So if you haven't heard of Joseph Lee or Big Joe Williams, check him out. Basically, AC/DC is a blues band. A high-powered hard rock blues band. And, I love them more as I get older. And it's kind of sad because, they are doing a tour this year, but I don't think they're going to be around much longer. Malcolm has gone. There's a couple other replacement players in the band for this tour that aren't original. But, we have kind of put them in the same block as the Ramones. They do what they do, and that's all that they do.
Yeah.
And there is comfort in that. So if you have not listened to 74 Jailbreak, go out and get it, kids.
Baby, please don't go.
Well, baby, share your next example.
Next example, good old Hendrix doing All Along the Watchtower. And this is a live version. I think most of this is from the Monterey Pop
Festival.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this was a weird album that I got when I worked at the record store. It was a cutout. I can't believe it was a cutout. It's I like this live version better than any other, the whole set better than any other live Hendrix I've heard.
I've heard the Pop Festival, and it sounds great. It's recorded well.
The sound is really good at the Pop Festival.
But when we were discussing the show, I always lean on that song. I mean, that song is like an anthem of a generation. And it's not his song,
No.
And a lot of people wouldn't even be able to tell you that Bob Dylan wrote it and originally recorded and performed it. It's just, this is the truest example, I think, of a remake just completely overshooting the original.
Yeah, because it was really just nobody's going to search out John Wesley Harding deep tracks or Blonde on Blonde. It was on 2 Dylan albums.
Yeah.
I think Dylan, after John Wesley Harding, he tried it on Blonde. It just never took off for him.
Yeah.
But Hendrix really made it his.
Just a different arrangement, kind of more psychedelic, harder edged, more rock, less folk. He absolutely made that song his own. And I love any of the variations of it because you have the studio version, which is in countless movies, but you do have these live performances that, thank God, they have recordings of him because his career was so short. I love every rendition I ever hear of this.
Yeah, it's just a great song.
Yeah, and so identifiable. Like, you could probably hear Dylan's version and go, what is this song? You hear this, no matter where he's playing it, whether it's the live or the studio version, it's Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, and his guitar playing is just magical on this song.
Yeah.
It really is.
It's, I think that simultaneously he gets, he gets a lot of credit and he deserves a lot of credit for being the innovator that he was. That being said, I still think he's an underrated artist. I think he's an artist that people know about. I don't think people just really dig in to everything that's there with him. And I'm guilty of that too. I have a couple of his records and I should probably have them all.
Yeah.
But he was an amazing artist, and what a huge loss in such a short span of time too.
Yeah, and this is one you don't see pop up much.
I've never seen this.
Yeah, I've never seen it at a show or anything.
What's on the back? Did we look at the back? Oh, it's just... Oh, and you have a little UBI strip, and you can order a Hendrix T-shirt.
Yeah, who doesn't need a Hendrix T-shirt?
Yeah. Well, the Hendrix Family Trust that runs his estate has really done a good job of keeping him out there. They have that Experience Hendrix tour, which if you have the chance, go see it. It's like 30 of the best guitarists in the world celebrating the music of Jimmy. But they also keep finding and taking care of these live recordings. Eddie Kramer, who was his producer, is kind of one of the guardians of the Hendrix estate as far as the music is concerned. And it's awesome. There's also a documentary out there about building Electric Ladyland Studios in New York. Jimmy had the money and the pull and the forethought to build this studio for him to record in when he was in New York. Although he spent a lot of time in London at the time when he was there, he could use this studio. And I guess that documentary is just amazing. It's an old live venue that they converted to this studio in New
It's
York
a
City.
legendary studio.
Yeah.
I mean, the albums that have come out of that studio they tick a lot of boxes.
Yep. So if you have a chance, check out that doc. I haven't seen it yet. I've kind of gotten caught up in docs lately.
They're good. They're fun.
They are fun and educational.
Yes.
Even if you feel like you know a lot of music, you're going to learn a lot too. That's a good one, dude.
You're up.
All right. Well, Wheels just gave me this album, and it's Wes Montgomery, who is one of the big jazz guitarists from back in the day, who happens to be from Indianapolis. And this is his greatest hits. He, a lot of times, he wrote his own music, and his own music is out there, but a lot of times he was reinterpreting songs. And if you look at this, he does A Day in the Life, Georgia on My Mind, I Say a Little Prayer, which is a Burt Bacharach song. Road Song is his own. Eleanor Rigby, also by the Beatles. Yesterday by the Beatles, When a Man Loves a Woman, Scarborough Fair, and Down Here on the Ground. If you've never listened to Wes, give him a little time. Good. I feel like jazz guitar music is different than jazz horns, so I feel like it's a little more open to people who might be a little shut off to the idea of jazz. But he was self-taught, didn't read music, but kind of reinvented interpretation of songs by the way he played and the way that he blended with the bands that he put around himself. And he's one of those dudes that both has the goods, is that good at what he does, but I feel such a connection to him because he's from here, and he was a phenomenon. I mean, everybody in the world wanted Wes Montgomery at one time.
And Wes has done a lot of remakes.
Yeah. I mean, he's interpreted a lot of songs, played with some of the best jazz musicians in the world, and I just wanted to, Wheels just gave me this, but I just wanted to show you. You've got the biography there and the portrait of him. Just an amazing dude and kind of forgotten. And the reason I keep mentioning him is because of that.
Yeah.
So Wes Montgomery's greatest hits, any of his stuff, any of his albums are great. He's got a lot of live stuff. Usually Record Store Day, his estate will put something out. So they're keeping the memory alive for sure.
That's a good one. And a local guy.
Yeah, local boy makes good. What's your next one, John?
All right, next. I've got my stuff out of order, but I've got it in order now.
This is a big one.
Run DMC, Walk This Way. And this came out in 86 on Raising Hell.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were to tell me that Aerosmith's Walk This Way, a hip-hop group, would have a
number
hit,
one single.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would not have believed you.
I know. I mean, there aren't a lot of things in our lifetimes that I think are touchstones musically. This is definitely one of them. This opened the door for hip hop and rap to become part of just general popular music. Before then, you didn't have that. Now, you had steps toward that. You had artists like Michael Jackson, Prince, later Lenny Kravitz, Hendrix. You had artists that are bringing, elements of R&B and pop and rock together and forming their own thing. But this is on another level. This is such an important record.
And Steven Tyler makes a small appearance on the album, and it kind of helped at that time. Aerosmith wasn't having the best career, and it helped rejuvenate them. Yeah,
well, just for a little history, I believe in 1985, Aerosmith's reunion and kind of what would you call it? They're getting back together, getting back to their roots, and getting the whole band back together on an album called Done with Mirrors, which is a good album, but that didn't really turn out to be their breakthrough in the 80s. They did this with Run DMC, and the next year, Aerosmith released Permanent Vacation, which was their reintroduction to everybody, and that set their career in the 80s and 90s and 2000s off. And I think that's their biggest selling album, and they had number one hit on that. I mean, it's crazy what this did for both.
Yeah, both of the bands really, it catapulted them into a different stratosphere, because now hip hop was part of regular music. It wasn't just hip hop.
Yeah, and it wasn't something that people were at arm's length from, something that they didn't understand or anything like that. I mean, this was on the radio every minute of every day for like a year.
Yeah. And it was really the first album or hip hop album to hit the Billboard Top 200.
Yeah. Pretty crazy.
And at least in the upper ends of the chart.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an amazing one. I do not have a regular version of this. I have a picture disc version of this album. I don't have a regular version, but I'd like to get it. Yeah, Run DMC, I mean, they had been a thing, but this just culturally, this introduced that culture to a lot of other cultures that were completely separated from them.
Yeah.
We're talking music, we're talking fashion, athletic wear, jewelry,
everything.
All of that stuff. And it was all, baked into a 3.5-minute Aerosmith song from the 70s.
Yeah, and this was produced by Rick Rubin and Simmons.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Russell Simmons and Rick Rubin kind of had started their collaboration and become big name producers.
Yep.
The music video, I mean, we talk about MTV, had a lot to do with its success.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the video, I mean, it's basically Aerosmith on one side of the wall, Run DMC on the other side of the wall. And they're literally breaking the wall down between them in the video, which, a little on the nose, but that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, you could, I mean, if you're pointing at the reason hip hop kind of took off, this is it.
Yeah. Rick Rubin had a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
Russell Simmons had a lot to do with that. Run DMC obviously had a lot to do with that. Rick Rubin is still considered one of the go-to producers in the world.
Yeah.
And he's not a musician.
No.
And a lot of people work with him. Like I remember hearing on the last Black Sabbath album, he produced that, 13. And Geezer Butler, the bassist for Sabbath, is like, I still don't know what he did. But he's got that mystique and he's got that track record. And he has things like this at the foundation of his career to say, hey, I know a thing or two. I mean, they also had a lot to do with the Beastie Boys early.
Yeah.
That's a great one. We don't talk about hip hop on this show a lot. I try to when I can, but I'm not going to just shoehorn stuff in because I feel like we need to represent hip hop. I'm going to talk about the stuff that I like. And there is plenty of hip hop that I like. I try to do that. We try to do that. Even John's son thinks that we should
talk more about hip hop.
Talk like here and there. So we will do that. But yeah, this one's very near and dear to my heart because I was that
you were right at the perfect age
I was
for this
12
to hit.
years old
Yeah.
and I wanted a tracksuit and I wanted Adidas. I didn't necessarily want the big gold chains, but I wanted little gold chains.
Yeah.
So, they got to me. So, they got to plenty of other kids, but that's a really good one. Nice. Okay.
What's next on the turntable?
Well, this looks like an abstract painting, but it's actually Armed Forces by Elvis Costello. And this was his third album. And there's a lot of great songs on this. This came out in January 1979. The two singles off of this are Oliver's Army and Accidents Will Happen. But the song I'm talking about is a little song called What's So Funny About Peace, Love, and Understanding, which is a Nick Lowe song that Elvis recorded for this album. Now, Nick Lowe recorded Elvis's first three albums, My Aim Is True, This Year's Model, Armed Forces. So Elvis and Nick Lowe were pretty connected, and it's a great song. I mean,
it's a great song.
Nobody knows that it's not a song that Elvis wrote. Everybody thinks that Elvis wrote it, but it's Nick Lowe. And if you listen to Nick Lowe, if you haven't, listen to his solo stuff, listen to his stuff with Rockpile. He's doing stuff now with another group and still touring. The song is fantastic. It's like I said, when that original version or the author or the writer of the song is completely erased,
Yeah.
and people think it's Elvis, that's the mark of both a good song and a good remake.
Yes.
And everybody here knows how much I love Elvis. So his first album was My Aim Is True in 1977. He kind of took the world by storm. Everybody was kind of talking about him as kind of like an angry punk artist. And he carried that through those first 3 albums, this being the third. There were problems on the tour for this with substance abuse and different things and saying some things in the press that you shouldn't say and using some words. And he basically thought his career in America was over because of some of these things, because you've got such a high profile and then you go out there, you're drunk, your performances are sloppy, and you're saying stupid things. That's just like throwing kerosene on a fire. The album after this was Get Happy, which I've never really thought about it, but maybe he was trying to go against some of that like angry punk ethos that everybody was trying to lay at him. After this album, I mean, he was fearless in the kind of music that he would write and record, and he's never been shy about doing covers either. So he's remade many a song, and he's also written many songs that other great artists have done. So I wanted to talk about Elvis because I don't think this album gets the recognition that it should.
No, but that song is a song, if you think of Elvis Costello, that's one of the top 3 songs that somebody who doesn't know him well thinks of.
Yeah. I mean, it's a career-defining song.
Yeah.
And he didn't write it. But and also, if you get the chance to see Elvis, he's still out there doing it and doing it really, really well. I've seen him many times. I'll probably see him. I don't think he's coming here, but I will travel to see him. So check it out. And then you have this is the alternate cover on the back here.
That's cool.
Elephants. Yeah. Armed Forces, I think they originally were going to call this album Emotional Fascism, and like right up to print time, they were going to do that. I think Pete Thomas, the drummer, was the one that came up with Armed Forces, because he kind of thought that Elvis was a bit of a tyrant in the way that he handled himself and handled the band and his basic attitude toward everything. So they renamed the album Armed Forces. So just a little trivia. You know, I've got plenty of that up here.
That's nice. All right.
What's next?
Well, let's dance.
Okay.
We're going to dance again. The Beatles, Twist and Shout.
I'm glad you didn't show this to Keith before the show, because tell us about this.
So this album's actually from Canada.
Mm-hmm. It's a Capital Canadian Press.
And it's in mono. And this was a gift from my daughter, a Christmas gift, and she found it at a Chicago record store.
That's cool.
And it was this was the second release in Canada, and it's on Capitol. And it came out in February of '64. And
when Capitol Records didn't know what to do with a band like the Beatles.
Yeah, what do we do with these guys?
It's so hard to understand, but it's from everything that I've heard from Keith, who's our resident Beatles expert, and everything I've read myself, they didn't know what they were doing.
And it consists of songs mostly drawn from Please, Please, Please Me, or Two Pleases, their first LP in the UK, and its parent album contains both original Beatles songs and some remakes like Twist and Shout.
And here we are with the portrait of him on the back, and Paul's got the cigarette in his hand.
And
It's such a different time.
and Twist and Shout was originally done by the Top Notes.
The Top Notes. Okay. Well, this is another one. When you hear them perform it, it's like, okay, well, that's a Beatles song, right? Yeah, because it sounds like it's a Beatles song.
Yeah. And it's funny, the Top Notes, they were an R&B group, but you know who produced them? Phil Spector.
Phil Spector. Okay. Who would boomerang and come back to the Beatles
Yeah.
later in their career. That's crazy. You know, the one thing I did hear, and Keith can correct me if I'm wrong, but the graveliness of John's voice on this is because apparently they had done a bunch of takes, right, Keith?
He actually, this was the last song they recorded for the Please Please Me album, which was recorded in a single day. They did
So-
the song in one take because that's all he had left in his
They
voice.
did this song in one take. Okay. So there
One
you go.
take.
He always hated it because he didn't like how he sounded on it. And he
Huh.
could do it better.
Interesting.
And it's funny, after the Top Notes, the Isley Brothers released a version in '62,
Yeah.
and then the Beatles really took the song to the next level.
I just love the way this looks because I have never seen it. And I mean, it's got the Capitol logo on it, but it's just,
It's a fun album.
it is so different than anything that I've seen from that era. That is such a cool
Yeah.
Canadian treat there. But it's true. I mean, that song, not just the album version, but the live versions. I think there's a couple live versions. There's one on Anthology 2, I think. Anyway, anytime they played it, it just sounds, oh, okay, the Beatles wrote that.
This was Twist and Shout was their first single to reach the top 20 on the Billboard 100 chart.
That's crazy. Huh. Well, that's a good one, man. And even better because it was a gift from your daughter,
Yes.
you know.
I treasure this one.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. My cats never buy me anything.
Darn cats.
Excellent. Well, you know what? We may talk about the Beatles a lot, but damn it, they deserve it,
Yes, they do.
right? Okay.
Twist and Shout.
So, one of my favorite things in the jazz world is John Coltrane's version of My Favorite Things. Is a studio album by Coltrane, released in March of 1961 on Atlantic. And this was his first album to feature him playing soprano sax. An edited version of the title track became a hit single that gained popularity in 1961 on radio. The recording became a major commercial success. So he was on tour with Miles in 1960, and he bought a soprano sax for Coltrane, and Coltrane wanted to kind of learn it and get into it and start playing it, and he did. After he left Miles' band for his first regular bookings at New York's Jazz Gallery in the summer of 1960, he put together his first version of his quintet, which was McCoy Tyner on piano, Steve Davis on bass, Elvin Jones on drums, and John. And I just love his version of this. It's from The Sound of Music. It's a Julie Andrews song. And, apparently this was through the rest of his career, this was his favorite thing that he recorded, is this song.
I like this song quite a bit.
Yeah.
I don't know why I like it, but I just like it.
It's just, I think part of it is that it's so identifiable because we saw it when we were kids, on TV or wherever. We know the song. Julie Andrews, obviously, just an amazing artist. There's a familiarity there, but there's also it's not such a tight interpretation of it that it's got its own thing happening. You know what I mean? It kind of operates on its own frequency. There's little pieces of it that you recognize, but it sounds so different than the song that we all know that it's based on. And this, I love this collection because this has both the mono and the stereo versions. of
Ooh,
this.
that's awesome.
Yeah. So
I wish more releases would do that.
Yeah, well, a lot of times they do, like on Blue Note.
On Blue Note,
on
yeah.
Blue Train, which is his big album for Blue Note, they did Tone Poet versions, both stereo and mono, but they're sold separately.
Yeah, they're always sold separately.
This is awesome because it's all in one.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and then of course you've got the biography on the back. So, Coltrane is so closely tied to Miles Davis because that's where he got his start. But he really came into his own with this. This was like his statement to the world of music and jazz that, just because you play with a genius doesn't mean you can't be a genius yourself.
And Coltrane's one of those artists that a lot of rock musicians look to.
Yeah. Yeah.
For whatever reason, they've latched on. Coltrane is the guy that a lot of alternative guys have really latched onto.
Yeah, because he's taken his modal approach to playing and interpreting music, and other people take that and use that in their approach to their playing. So he was absolutely a genius in the jazz world, also in the pop world, and the music world in general, and obviously lost him way too soon. But if you haven't checked Coltrane out, this is a great step into his stuff. Another one is Giant Steps. That's another really good record. So
That's nice.
John Coltrane, my favorite things.
Well, a little band called The Pretenders had a release in 1980.
Mm-hmm.
And their remake of Stop Your Sobbing, which was a Kinks song, really took off. And you know who produced that?
Who?
Your good old buddy, Nick Lowe.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah.
Did he produce this album?
He produced that song. I don't know if he
okay.
produced the whole album.
That's awesome. Oh, okay. Yeah, it says produced by Chris Thomas, and then Stop Your Sobbing, produced by Nick Lowe.
Yeah.
See, what I said was right. Nick Lowe is that guy. He's got that ear. I mean, he's a musician's musician, but I absolutely understand him being involved with them because I hear their stuff all the time. And like the first 4 Pretenders records are pretty untouchable. I mean,
Yeah.
really great. Sorry, I just
No.
jumped in there.
I agree 100%. Chrissy Hine just really made the song her own. And the Kinks are one of those bands, they're ripe for picking. There's tons of remakes of Kinks songs.
I was just getting ready to say that. So many bands do Kinks songs.
Yeah.
I think that speaks to the quality of songwriting that the Davies brothers brought to the table, but also there's just a universality. And even though the Kinks, I think, were way ahead of their time with some of the subject matter that they sang about, Lola being a good example of that.
Yeah.
They were just unapologetically doing their own thing. And I think that that's really what rock and roll is, right? It's just kind of, setting your own course.
And the original came out in 1964, so
Jeez.
16 years later.
Yeah. But like I said, so many people, like Eddie Van Halen was obviously a Kinks fan because they did a few Kinks songs on their albums, and talk about reinventing. But, when you've got a great song, I feel like it can be presented in so many different ways that make it a great song. I mean, it can be distilled down. It can be built and produced up. I mean, there's a lot of ways to approach it. I mean, like the Jeff Beck thing. I mean, he took a Beatles song and basically turned it into a reggae jam, and it's cool.
Yeah, and it was one of the singles that helped drive this album. I think it reached platinum by 82.
Yeah.
So it was a big hit.
Yeah. That's great. I love the Pretenders. I love Chrissie Hynde. I believe they did the first 2 albums and then they lost 2 members of the band.
Yeah.
And so basically had to rebuild.
Yeah.
But really before they even got started, which is so tragic.
They didn't really even lose a beat.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they were on that upward trajectory that, you just gotta keep going on. But she is one of my favorite females in rock. I mean, she's just a badass.
Yeah, there's a lot we don't know about Chrissie, which she may wind up in a short. 3 things you don't know about Chrissie Hynde.
Oh, you should do that.
I will.
I love it. I love that you brought that. I thought about it, but I figured you would.
The Pretenders. Stop your sobbing. What do you have?
So my next one is kind of a twofer. It's a Def Leppard. Yeah. And Yeah Too. And these are studio albums of basically Def Leppard covering songs across the whole album. And it's really, really cool. Yeah is their 9th studio album. It came out in 2005. And, they had No Matter What by Badfinger, Rock On, 20th Century Boy by T-Rex, Mark Bolan. And I just love that they wear their influences on their sleeves like this. And Def Leppard, Joe Elliott, the singer, he's like a musicologist. He understands where music has been and gone and where it can go to. And he is a huge T-Rex and Mark Bolan fan. But I got these 2 in their collection number 3, and I love the pictures of them inside there. It's very cool. And then you've got Yeah Too, which I think Yeah Too came out in 2021.
So you can get these individually?
I believe so. Yeah. And there's Vivian Campbell in the front there. I actually met him at the Las Vegas airport a few years ago when I was there to see Iron Maiden. But yeah, I love their version of 20th Century Boy. But listen to the track listing. 20th Century Boy, Rock On, David Essex, Hanging on the Telephone, Waterloo Sunset, which is Kinks, Hellraiser, Mike Chapman, Nicky Chin. 10538 Overture, which is a ELO song, Street Life by Brian Ferry, Drive-In Saturday by David Bowie, Little Bit of Love, The Golden Age of Rock and Roll by Ian Hunter, No Matter What, as I mentioned, from Badfinger. He's gonna step on you again. Don't believe a word. Stay with me by the Faces to end this up. It is great. They celebrate this music. They love it, and you really hear it in their performances. It's really awesome. So we don't talk a lot about Def Leppard on the show, but I think they're great. I wish they went back to that like hard rocking sound that they had on their first 3 records. But yeah, these are worth checking out. If you like covers, I mean, and they do it. They really, really do it well. So Def Leppard, yeah, and Yeah Too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's stick in the 80s with Quiet Riot, Mental Health, and they had a little song on this called Come Feel the Noise. Come on, Feel the Noise by Slade. And I think there were 2 Slade covers, I think, on this album.
No, it was this.
And then
their second album, Condition Critical,
one. Yeah.
had Mama We're All Crazy.
Yeah.
We've talked about Slade. They're another of the English bands that just didn't take off in America, but they were very popular in Europe. And obviously Quiet Riot went to that well 2 albums in a row, and they had hits with them. So yeah, this is I don't have this.
Yeah, it was the first time this song really found its footing with an American audience,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is amazing. It's a great song.
It is. It is.
Now, I wasn't a big Quiet Riot fan when this came out.
Yeah. They were all over the radio.
They were all over the radio, and I think I was working in a record store, and this was it flew off the shelves.
Yeah, and they're kind of considered like that first introduction to heavy metal to most people. And just in case you haven't checked it out, we had a show where we were lucky enough to have Rudy Sarzo on. I don't remember what episode number that is. It was an audio only show, but
there's Rudy.
There's Rudy right there. He spent like 2.5 hours talking to us, talking about all of the Ozzy Osbourne, Randy Rhoads, Quiet Riot. I mean, the fact that we had somebody that has his hands in so many different parts of the rock world still surprises me. But go check out the Rudy Sarzo show because it's great.
Yeah, it really is. It was a fun show.
These guys had been together for years. Randy Rhoads was originally the guitarist in Quiet Riot. And then he kind of got plucked out of that when they didn't go anywhere in the U.S. to go play for Ozzy. Now, that's why Rudy ended up going and playing with Ozzy because he was, knew Randy. But by this time, Randy had passed away. And Rudy went back to Quiet Riot. But there's so much history here. This band didn't take off. They had 2 albums, I think, in Japan only that weren't released in the U.S. And then this came out, and they were worldwide stars overnight.
Yeah, this was their 3rd album. Mm-hmm. And the first one came out in, 77 maybe?
Something like that.
Yeah. Because I know Quiet Riot 2 came out in 78.
Yep.
And this came out in 83. So they were, just chugging along. Mm-hmm. And
yeah, Kevin Dubrow, the singer, really kind of held. He and Frankie Banali, the drummer, really held it together. And then this was their springboard. I mean, Kevin passed away probably 15 years ago, I think. But Frankie Banali just passed away a couple years ago too.
And you know what album it replaced as number 1 on the Billboard 200 chart?
1984. So I'm going to guess Synchronicity.
Yes.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
In 83.
That means
the end of 83.
That means I'm a complete music dork.
You are. That was good. That was a good guess.
I spoiled the surprise for you.
You win the showcase.
Oh, do I?
Yeah.
Do I win a Cars Candy O?
Yeah.
No, that's great. I didn't know that, but I figured timeline-wise that's what it was.
And it's sold more than 10 million copies worldwide, 6 million in the U.S. alone.
Unbelievable.
6 times platinum.
Yeah, yeah.
And I got it for 99 cents.
Is there a date on that?
I don't know. It wasn't that long ago.
Okay.
It
says 0587, but I bet you got it more recently than that.
Yeah. And that may have been the original sticker.
Yeah, could have been. No, it's awesome. I love this album. It's fun. It scared people to hear heavy guitars.
Well, look
like
at the damn cover. It's scary.
It is scary. It is scary. In retrospect, it's goofy. Oh, I love the fact that on his straitjacket, he's got pins of each of the guys in the band.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've ever noticed that until now. That's great. But no, they are a landmark rock band. I mean, they don't get talked about enough. They don't really have a huge catalog. But Rudy is back in Quiet Riot. He's the only original member back in the band, and he's touring with the band. So if you see him, you get to go see a little piece of music history. Not only did we interview Rudy, but I met him way back, and he could not be a better, nicer gentleman than he is.
Yeah, he's just a prince.
Just a sweetheart of a dude. And, appreciates his little piece of music history, actually big piece of music history, and was so gracious in sharing it with us. So please go back and listen to that back catalog that we have. That's a good one, man. I like it. I can't believe you brought the Quiet Riot and I didn't.
Yeah.
So, Macklemore Avenue is an album by Booker T and the MGs that it's a mostly instrumental covers album of songs from the Beatles' Abbey Road, which this came out in 1970. Yes. So Abbey Road had only come out just months before this. According to Booker T, he said he was in California when he heard Abbey Road for the first time. And he thought it was incredibly courageous of the Beatles to drop their format and move out musically like they did, to push the limit like that and reinvent themselves when they had no need to do that. They were the top band in the world, but they still reinvented themselves. The music was just incredible, so he felt he needed to pay tribute to it. So if you haven't listened to this, it is fantastic. They do Golden Slumbers, Carry That Weight, The End, Here Comes the Sun, Come Together, Something, Because You Never Give Me Your Money, Sun King, Mean Mr. Mustard, Polythene Pam, She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, I Want You, She's So Heavy. And then there's a Stax Remasters version that I think was CD only that has other Beatles songs on it, but it's got Booker T organ and piano, Steve Cropper on guitar, Donald Duck Dunn on bass, and Al Jackson Jr. on drums. And I love that Macklemore Avenue was the road that Stax was on. So this is them kind of recreating the Abbey Road thing. And I just love it. If you haven't listened to it, give it a listen. I've talked about that Stax documentary, and I've always been a fan of all of that, but now I'm even more so. Sam and Dave, Otis Redding, Booker T and the MGs. The list of unbelievable artists just goes on and on and on. And I love that they did a little tribute to the Beatles.
I love the cover.
Yeah, you got to get this. You got to get it. It's really great. And then there's another shot. Yeah, I love it. But, you know, Booker T and the MGs, if you watch that documentary, I mean, these guys were kids. They were kids from the neighborhood that made this music. And basically all of those Stax artists, other than Sam and Dave weren't from Memphis. All of those artists were people from the area. Isn't that crazy?
That is so cool.
Yeah, it is cool. So check it out, man.
All right. Next up is a guy called Lenny Kravitz. And Lenny did a cover of American Woman by the Guess Who, and
kind of made it his own.
It really made it his own. And I mean, when he recorded it, the song did well for the Guess Who, but Lenny's version, he won a Grammy for Best Male Rock Performance. And it was in movies, it was on the radio, it was everywhere.
It was in the second Austin Powers movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's when a song, a remake, I think the way a remake transcends is they use that version as opposed to the original version.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people think he wrote it. I'm pretty sure my wife thought that it was a Lenny Kravitz song.
Yeah, I'm sure anybody under 40 thinks it's a Lenny song.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, well, that's the way music is.
Yeah, yeah. It's cool. It's great. I mean, he's got such a great catalog, and he can do anything. I love the original version of the song, the Guess Who. But man, yeah, his version you hear almost as often as you hear Fly Away.
Yeah. And I
like the gatefold of this collection.
Yeah, it's really super.
Shots of him through the years. He's an amazing artist, man. He's done He's done very well for himself, and I kind of lumped him in earlier with Hendrix and Prince. It's just, for these black artists who just because they're black, people automatically pigeonhole them into an R&B place, but these guys do everything that they do, and they do it well, and they do what they want, basically.
Yeah, the original came out in 70.
Yep. That's crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, that was plenty of time to forget about the original.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that was kind of an AM radio staple.
Yeah.
Guess Who? The Guess Who became Bachman Turner Overdrive.
Yeah.
Basically. And they had plenty of hits themselves. But yeah, it's really kind of an interesting study. I mean, we could do every show on remakes. We literally could, because there are so many out there that people don't know of.
Yeah.
So they assume that whoever they heard it from is, like the original. It opens up a whole world when you find out that a song that you like was originally done by somebody else.
Yeah, and he really, I mean, the original Guess Who version was rocking, but he upped the tempo.
Yeah. It's great. And that's a good call. I have none of his stuff on vinyl.
I've got a bunch of CDs, and that's why I picked up the greatest hits on vinyl.
I think I've got like his first 5 on CD. That Are You Gonna Go My Way and Mama Said.
Yeah.
Both of those records are so good. So good call, man. I really
Lenny.
like it. I approve. Well, this is an album by Paul McCartney, and it's called Back in the USSR. It's written in Russian right here. This is also known as the Russian album. It's the 7th solo studio album by Paul McCartney, released in 1988, exclusively in the Soviet Union. The album consists of live in-studio recordings of covers, mainly rock and roll oldies, and the first pressing contained 11 tracks. The second contained 13, with a track list of 14 songs. The album was released internationally in October of 1991. This just has a history of rock and roll on it. It's got Kansas City, 20 Flight Rock by Eddie Cochran, Lottie Miss Claudie, Bring It On Home to Me, Lucille, Don't Get Around Much Anymore, which is a Duke Ellington song. That's All Right Mama, Ain't That a Shame by Fats Domino, Crackin' Up, Just Because, and Midnight Special. So if you haven't heard it, it's really great. And I really think that Paul really, like that end of the 80s, like 87 through like 93, I really feel like he got his footing. Now, I mean, he's a former Beatle. He had wings and didn't have anything to prove to anybody. But man, in the early 90s, he did 2 records where he co-wrote songs with Elvis Costello, Off the Ground and Flowers in the Dirt. Those 2 albums are just fantastic. And this is kind of in that era. He was just on fire. And I really think his last great solo album was Flaming Pie, which I think was 95. But this is really great, and I love the packaging. I don't know if this is technically from Russia, but they did when they first released this, they did do it in Russia, and they released 50,000 copies of it. So this may be. It doesn't have a UPC. I'll have to get in to the Run Out Groove and look at the matrices there, but I just love it. I love the design. It's really cool. And obviously the Beatles always wore their influences on their sleeves, but this is great for him to kind of go back and reinterpret these songs. It's a lot of fun. He did another I think he did another album of covers called Run Devil Run a few years later, like in the mid-90s, and that's really good too. But yeah, back in the USSR, Paul McCartney.
That's a good one. That's one I don't think I've ever seen.
Yeah, well, check it out.
Yeah.
I bought it for $7 many years ago.
Ooh, bargain time.
Yeah, I don't know what it's worth now, but yeah. What's next on your more than 7?
So there's the Pulp Fiction soundtrack.
Yeah.
And there's a band on this called Urge Overkill doing a Neil Diamond song.
It's so good.
Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon.
This is played on the reel-to-reel when John Travolta goes to pick up Uma Thurman.
Yes.
To go out to dinner.
His date with Mia.
And I love the original version. And if I'm being completely honest, like the Neil Diamond version and the Urge Overkill version, they're very close.
They are very close because Urge is a Chicago band, and it was on their their first Saturation.
Yep.
Which is a great album in the 90s.
I honestly don't know how I just came up with that because I mean I love the band, but I worked in a record store around that time, so that's probably how. Sister Havana was the other single on that, and that is a kick-ass song.
I listened to that record a bunch when it came out.
Yeah, if you haven't listened to that Urge Overkill Saturation, go get it.
Yeah, get it.
Anyway, sorry.
So, the Neil Diamond version was probably a bigger hit, but with Pulp Fiction being such a massive film
phenomenon,
and the soundtrack being hooked at the hips to that, it helped them become part of the music world more.
Yeah, and when we were talking about Midnight Cowboy, much in the same way that they weave the music kind of into the narrative of that movie, I feel like that's what Tarantino does. Music is a huge part of his movies to the point where it's almost part of the narrative. And I just love when they can do that. It's obviously there's a score and music written for the movie, but taking these songs that people know and love and blending them into a movie like that is just awesome.
Absolutely.
It takes the movie to a totally different place.
Yeah, and I mean the song, because it was on this soundtrack, really was the biggest hit the band had.
Yeah. Music is there to be celebrated, man. It's not just because it's broken up in genres and this may be country and that may be rock and that may be jazz. It's all there for us to grab and take. Sorry. I'll get off my soapbox.
It's a good soapbox, but we messed up. Actually, Girl, You'll Be a Woman Now was not on Saturation.
Oh, Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon was not on Saturation.
Yeah.
Okay, but Sister Havana was on that.
Yeah, and it was the same time period.
Yeah.
It came out it came out in 93.
94. Oh, this was 93?
This was...
I think Pulp Fiction was 94.
Yeah, Pulp Fiction was 94.
So Saturation came out in 93.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and I love all these little scenes from the movie on the back here. This is one of those that you could argue should be a gatefold. But don't get me started on that soapbox.
And good old Neil Diamond's original came out in 67, and it was a top 10 hit.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great song.
But Neil Diamond was big in the early 60s.
Yeah. I mean, Neil kind of cut his teeth writing for he wrote music for the Monkees. A lot of people recorded Neil's music.
Yeah. Is it I'm a Believer was... a
Yep.
Neil Diamond
Yep.
song
Yep.
for the Monkees.
Yep.
Yeah, he was just a great songwriter.
Yeah. On the Neil Diamond tip, he did. Oh, that's my chair squeaking. He did an album called 12 Songs that was produced by none other than Rick Rubin, who we've mentioned in this show. He did an album called 12 Songs with just him and a guitar. And it is fantastic. Go out. I haven't ever seen it on vinyl. If I do, I'll buy it, but I've got it on CD. I'll actually share it with you. It is fantastic. You really, him playing and singing, you really like, man, this guy was the shit.
Yeah.
Back in the day, you know. I love Neil Diamond. I listened to him so much as a kid that I'm predisposed to liking Neil Diamond.
Yeah.
But I also love this remake of his song because it's just perfect, you know?
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, that's a good one, man.
All right. What's your
Excellent.
last one?
Well, you know, we talk about albums with a cover song on them. And then, you know, there are albums like the Def Leppard albums that are completely covers. This is considered technically an EP, but this is Feedback by Rush. And man, this came out in 2004. It features 8 covers of songs that were influential to the band members during the 60s. This marked the 30th anniversary of the release of Rush's debut album. Listen to the songs on here. Summertime Blues, Eddie Cochran. Heart Full of Soul, Graham Goldman, The Yardbirds. For What It's Worth. Talk about another song from the 60s that's just, you know, in everything, in every movie about Vietnam.
Yeah.
Or living in that time. The Seeker by The Who. Mr. Soul by Buffalo Springfield, written by Neil Young. 7 and 7 Is, Arthur Lee, by Love. And Shapes of Things, also by the Yardbirds and the Jeff Beck Group. And Crossroads, which is Robert Johnson originally, and Cream did a version of that. But when I read that this was coming out, I freaked out. I'm like, I cannot believe Rush is doing a covers record because it's such, you listen to their music and you hear a lot of stuff. You hear jazz, you hear pop and rock, and they're a progressive band anyway. I just love hearing the music that they love and hearing them redo it. And this is a 200-gram version of these that they put out in 2015. They did their whole catalog on 200-gram vinyl. I didn't have the money at the time to buy them all. I wish I had, because some of them are worth hundreds of dollars. But I did manage to get this one, and I just love it. And I love the picture of them in the gatefold, kind of like in the middle of the lava lamp there. It's just so cool. And the fact that we don't have Neil anymore is kind of heartbreaking, but I think back, the first time I saw Rush was in 1988, and I probably saw them 10 times in 15 years. And I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity, and my parents allowed me to go to any show that I wanted to, because those are the best memories of my life. But I just love the cover. It looks like an old, it looks like a flyer you'd see on a telephone pole at Haight-Ashbury or something. It's good. You got to listen to this one. If you haven't listened to this, check it out because it's really great.
I want to really hear The Seeker, because the drums on The Seeker,
Yeah.
I mean, from The Who were phenomenal.
Oh yeah.
But hearing a band that's so drum heavy, like Rush, do The Seeker,
We'll listen to it right
Yeah.
after we're done with the show.
I can't wait.
Yeah, Feedback by Rush, man. It's really, really good. People are speculating whether Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson will do anything musically again, tour or whatever. But when you've been, this is like, we're beyond the 50th anniversary of Rush now. And, when you've done everything that they've done, I can't imagine being like, yeah, I want to travel around the world. I mean, these guys toured constantly. I mean, they opened for Kiss like 40 times, 50 times. They played with every huge band out there. They cut their teeth doing that on the road. And then, by some, well, it's because their music's great, but by some miracle, they became a big deal.
Yeah.
And we're still talking about them now. And, on top of everything else, they're Canadian. Like, I know Canada takes care of its own artists. There are laws that television and radio stations have to play like a 60 or 70% Canadian artists, which kind of seems weird at first, but man, if they didn't have that, who knows if we ever would have heard of Rush. I mean, Rush broke in Cleveland because of a local DJ there. And I think that's appropriate because the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's there. And so much music came out of Cleveland. But yeah, if you haven't listened to this, give it a listen. You can look for it on vinyl, but I have a feeling it's going to be pretty expensive.
Yeah.
But it's so fun. It's so fun to do a remakes show because I mean we've done the cover show, but we're kind of talking about remakes. That, like you said, that transcend that original, and it's all the language of music. It's all built into that love of music, and this has been a fun one. Because
yes, it really has.
These are artists. Some of these are artists and songs that we haven't talked about before, and it's cool to look at them in a light that we don't usually cast on them. We also appreciate all of you. And we invite you to check out our YouTube channel. We invite you to go into the archives and see all that beautiful stuff that our cast and crew has put together. We want you to comment. What else do we want everybody to do, John?
Subscribe.
Yes.
Share.
Yep.
And this may not be for us, but for you, spin vinyl.
Yeah, listen to your music. I feel like doing this show keeps my relationship with my music very, very tight-knit. I also want to take a moment and just thank everybody out there that listens to the podcast, that watches the stuff on YouTube, that buys any of the merch that we have available in the merch shop, and we don't want them to forget to go to the merch link. We love doing this. This is something that John and I started doing because we just wanted to. And it's such an integral part of both of our lives now and the lives of other people around us. It means the world to me and to all of us. So I want to thank everybody out there that listens. Please let us know what you want to hear, what you want to see unboxed, any of the things you have questions about. Talk to us on our YouTube channel or our social media. We try to reply to those things quickly. And we love the comments and the conversations that we have there. I just want to thank you guys for checking us out and continuing to. For Wheels, I'm Jay, and we'll see you all the next time around.
It's a final adventure.